"You're turning down our offer. Good luck finding something better," the hiring manager said, tossing his head back with a laugh that bounced off the glass walls of the conference room. His colleagues exchanged amused looks as if I'd delivered the funniest joke they'd heard all week. I clutched my portfolio tighter, heat creeping up my neck. My expertise in rare earth material recycling commands a higher market value. 8 years of specialized experience isn't reflected in this offer. We have 20 eager candidates who'd take this salary without hesitation, he replied, tapping my resume dismissively. Perhaps you've overestimated your significance. Something inside me snapped. I stood, smoothed my dress, and met his gaze directly. No, I haven't. But you certainly have underestimated it. As I walked out, I heard them snickering behind me. 3 weeks of interviews ending like this. I had 2 weeks until rent was due, and dwindling savings. I never imagined that within 72 hours everything would shift. Before I explain how I turned that humiliation into the greatest career triumph of my life, I want you to recall a time when someone undervalued your worth. Remember the feeling? That fire in your chest? That inner voice saying, "I deserve more." Hold on to that sensation, because what happens next could give you the courage to stand firm the next time someone tries to undermine your value. My name is Belinda Arvell, and until 6 months ago, I was the unsung genius behind one of the biggest breakthroughs in rare earth material recycling technology. The type of innovation that environmental scientists and manufacturing executives dream of. A method that cut extraction costs by 42% while improving yield purity. The kind of breakthrough that landed on industry magazine covers with my boss's name, highlighted while mine was nowhere to be found. I had always been the quiet one, the meticulous researcher who stayed late analyzing test results, while others attended industry events. My parents, both high school teachers from Puerto Rico who had settled in Michigan, instilled in me a belief that excellence speaks for itself. Let your work be your voice. My father always said, for years I believed that. Until the day I watched my discovery, the culmination of 3 years of relentless research, being presented at the annual Earth Resources Conference by my supervisor Meredith. She stood in the spotlight, answering questions about my process, receiving praise for my discovery while I sat in the audience, invisible. I had developed the chemical bonding theory that made the extraction possible. I had run thousands of tests in that basement lab with outdated equipment. I had sacrificed weekends and holidays. And yet, there I was, reduced to a mere footnote in her presentation with support from the research team. That night in my hotel room, I made a vow. Never again would I let my contributions be diminished. Never again would I allow someone else to claim credit for my brilliance. Never again would I stay quiet about my worth. So when the offer arrived from Greenword Technologies, a rising company in sustainable manufacturing with all their eco-friendly buzzwords and bold promises of innovation, I was cautiously hopeful. Their recruitment process had been rigorous. 3 technical interviews, a full presentation of my research methodology, meetings with 5 different department heads. They had seemed genuinely impressed by my portfolio. The hiring manager, Nolan, had even nodded appreciatively during my presentation on molecular separation techniques. Yet, when the official offer showed up, the salary was barely higher than what I'd earned as a mid-level researcher at my last job. Despite this being a senior role demanding specialized expertise that fewer than 50 people in the country possessed, it was offensively low. I prepared extensively for the negotiation meeting. I researched market ranges, compiled data on comparable roles, rehearsed my talking points. I stepped into that conference room ready to advocate for myself. What I didn't expect was mockery. After that degrading meeting, I sat in my car for 20 minutes, hands locked on the steering wheel, trying to slow my pounding heartbeat. Had I just made a disastrous mistake in this economy with sustainability budgets shrinking across the industry? Had I just walked away from the only chance I had? My phone buzzed, a text from my sister Lucia. How did it go? I couldn't reply right then. Instead, I drove back to my apartment, my modest one-bedroom where rent now felt terrifyingly high. While reheating leftover rice and beans for dinner, I finally called Lucia. "You did what?" she blurted when I told her. "In this economy, Belinda, are you out of your mind?" "They offered junior-level pay for senior-level responsibilities," I said, pacing my tiny kitchen. The hiring manager actually laughed when I countered. "But your apartment? Your bills? I'll figure it out." Lucia exhaled sharply through the phone. "Look, I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself, but be practical. Maybe call them tomorrow. Say you've reconsidered, and just take the job knowing I'm undervalued from day one." "No thanks." After we hung up, I opened my laptop and applied to 14 positions. I booked 2 interviews for the upcoming week. I updated my professional profiles. I calculated exactly how long my savings would last if I cut everything down to essentials. 53 days. Not ideal, but doable. The next morning, I got up early and went for a run, pushing myself harder than usual, trying to outrun the doubt clawing at me. Had I been arrogant? Was my work truly as valuable as I believed? Maybe Meredith had been justified in taking the credit. Maybe my contribution wasn't as groundbreaking as I thought. No, I rejected those thoughts immediately. I knew my value. I knew what I had achieved. I knew exactly what I could offer to any company smart enough to recognize it. 3 days passed. I prepared for my upcoming interviews, researching each company thoroughly. I wasn't going to repeat the same mistake twice. This time, I brought up compensation expectations early in the process. Then at 2:17 p.m., my personal phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello, this is Belinda. Ms. Arvello, this is Darren Winslow, CEO of Greenword Technologies." My breath hitched. I'd never spoken with the CEO during the interviews, had never even seen him in the building. "I heard you declined our offer," he said, his voice calm but curious. "That's unusual?" I stayed quiet, waiting for him to continue. "After you left, our engineering team reviewed your portfolio again. Specifically, your molecular separation technique for lithium extraction. They believe your recycling method could transform our production line. The projected savings are significant, far greater than we initially estimated." I sat at my kitchen table processing this shift. "Miss Arvell, are you still there?" "Yes," I replied, keeping my tone even. "I'm considering what it would take for me to join a company where qualified candidates are openly ridiculed for understanding their worth." The silence afterward was deeply satisfying. "I understand your reluctance," he finally said. "What would it take to bring you onto our team? Name your price." I had pictured this moment, not specifically with Greenword, but in general. What would make me feel valued, protected, certain my work wouldn't be exploited or minimized? "I need 3 things," I said firmly. "First, market rate compensation plus 15% to account for the initial disrespect. Second, I lead the materials division with full autonomy over research directions and project execution. Third, and most importantly, I implement transparent salary bands across every department with no disparities tied to gender or race." Another pause followed. "The first 2 are manageable. The third is uncommon in our field." "So was laughing at a qualified candidate," I replied. "Yet here we are." "To be clear," Darren said, "you're requesting salary transparency across the entire organization." "Yes, with particular emphasis on correcting the historical undervaluation of women and minorities in STEM. I've lived it, and I refuse to help maintain it." He cleared his throat. "I need to review this with the board. May I call you back tomorrow?" "Of course," I said. "I'll wait for your call." 10 minutes after hanging up, an email arrived from Nolan, the hiring manager who'd laughed in my face. Ms. Arvell, I understand you spoke with our CEO. Please reconsider our offer. The manufacturing timeline has already been built around implementing your extraction method. We can't hit the deadline without your expertise. I apologize if our last meeting ended poorly. I'd be glad to discuss terms that would make you comfortable joining us. The difference between his earlier mockery and his current desperation was almost amusing. I closed my laptop without answering. That evening, my phone rang again. Darren Winslow. Ms. Arvello, I've met with the board. They're willing to accept your terms with one adjustment. We'll implement the transparent salary bands, but would like to roll them out over 6 months to allow proper review and updates to current contracts. Would that be acceptable? My heart pounded. I had expected resistance, bargaining, at least a counteroffer, not immediate agreement. That would be acceptable, I said, masking my surprise. I'd want to be directly involved in the review. Of course, he replied. Legal will prepare a contract tomorrow. When can you begin? 2 weeks later, I walked into Greenword Technologies as the new director of material sciences. My salary was double the original offer with a signing bonus that covered 6 months of rent. My office overlooked the city skyline, with a small adjoining lab for early-stage testing. On my first day, I requested the compensation records for my entire division. When HR hesitated, I reminded them of my agreement with the CEO. The spreadsheet landed in my inbox by noon. The patterns were exactly what I had expected. Women in comparable positions were earning 22% less than their male counterparts. Employees with Hispanic surnames like mine averaged 18% lower pay than others with identical credentials. The longest tenured staff, especially those who weren't forceful negotiators, were the most underpaid compared to recent hires. I spent my first week learning the workflow, meeting my team, and reviewing ongoing projects. Everyone was courteous, but I could feel their curiosity and maybe a hint of skepticism. Who was this newcomer who had negotiated directly with the CEO? What made her so exceptional? On Friday afternoon, I called a division meeting. 57 employees filled the conference room, including Nolan, who now officially reported to me, a reality he seemed to be grappling with given his tight smile and stiff posture. Thank you all for welcoming me this week, I began. I've been impressed by the creativity happening here, but I've also noticed areas where we can improve, not just in our technical systems, but in how we value our people. I clicked to the first slide, showing anonymized salary data that revealed the gaps. This is our current compensation setup with identifiers removed. As you can see, we have serious inconsistencies that don't align with experience, performance, or impact. The room fell silent. Employees leaned in, searching for where they might land on the charts. Over the next 6 months, we'll be implementing transparent salary bands company-wide. Every role will have a clear pay range based on skills and experience, not negotiation tactics or, I paused, locking eyes briefly with Nolan, personal bias. If you're enjoying this story so far, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Tap the bell icon so you don't miss part 2, where you'll see exactly how I reshaped that toxic workplace, confronted the people who tried to undermine me, and ultimately achieve the most gratifying professional revenge of my life. Believe me, what comes next is something every undervalued person needs to hear. After the meeting, several employees stayed behind, wanting to talk privately. A research analyst named Paloma approached first, her hands fiddling with her tablet. "What you showed us, is that really happening here?" she asked softly. "Yes, and we're going to fix it." "I've been here 3 years," she admitted. "Last month I learned my new coworker, a man with half my experience, earns $15,000 more than me." When I mentioned it to Nolan, he said discussing pay was unprofessional. By Monday morning, whispers were circulating throughout the building. Some employees felt hopeful, others wary, and a few, especially those benefiting from the current setup, were openly irritated. At 9:30 a.m., Nolan appeared in my doorway without knocking. "You've stirred up quite a reaction," he said, taking the chair across from my desk without invitation. "The executive team is uneasy about what you showed on Friday." "The data speaks for itself," I replied, continuing to review the project timeline on my screen. "Data can be misread," he insisted. "Some employees negotiate higher pay because of rare skills. Others take less because they value work-life balance or certain perks. Presenting raw numbers without context creates unnecessary friction." I finally looked up. "Is that the logic you used when I negotiated with you? That I lacked unique skills but valued work-life balance?" His jaw tightened. "That situation was different. It wasn't. It matched the exact pattern reflected in the data, but we're moving forward with transparency regardless of how uncomfortable it is for those who've benefited from secrecy." He leaned in. "Look, Belinda. May I call you Belinda? Dr. Arvello is fine." A flicker of irritation crossed his face. "Dr. Arvello, then. You're new here. You don't understand our culture, our history. These kinds of sweeping changes could seriously impact morale." "Whose morale exactly? The underpaid employees who just learned they've been systematically undervalued, or the overpaid executives who've profited from that system?" Nolan stood. "The CEO may have approved this plan, but actual implementation requires cooperation across multiple departments. My team controls project budget allocations. Just something to keep in mind." The threat was unmistakable. If I pushed ahead with compensation equity, he'd obstruct my projects. "Thank you for making your stance so transparent," I said evenly. "I appreciate knowing exactly where we stand." After he left, I opened my email and drafted a message to Darren Winslow outlining the conversation and requesting a meeting regarding project resource allocation. I had zero intention of being intimidated after coming this far. The following weeks were relentless as mid-level managers quietly sabotaged my progress. Meeting invites vanished from my calendar, critical emails were buried, and lab equipment orders were mysteriously delayed. Yet, I wasn't alone. Paloma became my strongest ally, guiding me through the company's political trenches and introducing me to others who had been similarly overlooked. Henri, a brilliant chemical engineer, repeatedly denied promotions despite his innovations, and Daisy, a lab technician whose protocol improvements had been implemented company-wide without credit. Together, we worked late nights refining my extraction method for Greenwood's needs, converting an abandoned storage room into a makeshift test lab, and documenting every achievement and obstruction. 6 weeks later, I presented our first prototype results to the executive team, proving a 37% increase in rare earth recovery and a 44% reduction in chemical waste, with millions in potential profit. Darren was impressed. The board asked insightful questions, but Nolan tried to undermine the data, claiming our testing was incomplete and costs unaccounted for. Until I revealed the fully detailed implementation plan, cost analysis, and a phased rollout requiring only 2 short production disruptions. The board approved expedited funding, and Darren personally praised my work. But Nolan's anger simmered. The next morning, my key card access was revoked, and our research server was maintenance locked, though Henri's secret backups kept us safe. We pretended to be set back, curious how far Nolan would go. That afternoon, he held an emergency meeting without me, announcing my project would be put on hold for resource reassessment. I walked in just as he finished, challenging his authority by reminding everyone the board had approved implementation. He insisted the delay was within his power as Chief Operations Officer, a title I hadn't realized he held. But when I asked if the CEO knew he was overruling a board directive, uncertainty flickered across his face. He tried to maintain composure, insisting it was a postponement, not a cancellation. But the room had already shifted. Interesting, because the only reason I missed the first part of the meeting was my scheduled call with Adaptive Systems, the equipment supplier already contracted for our implementation next week. Murmurs rippled across the room as I added, "That contract was signed this morning by Darren himself," and held up my tablet showing the executed agreement. The color drained from Nolan's face. I immediately shifted the room's attention to the real timeline, spending the next 30 minutes outlining deliverables, assigning responsibilities, and solidifying deadlines, while Nolan sat frozen behind a tight, furious smile. As the meeting ended, he grabbed my arm and hissed that I was making a serious mistake, that no one was irreplaceable. I slipped my arm free and replied, "Some people are. The trick is knowing which ones." The following weeks were a whirlwind as the new equipment arrived on schedule and my team worked around the clock, anticipating and neutralizing every subtle sabotage attempt, from incorrect parameters to missing catalysts, while the compensation review advanced. Working with HR and finance, we identified 87 severely underpaid employees, and although the adjustment plan would cost $3 million annually, it paled in comparison to the savings my extraction process was generating. 3 months after my arrival, we activated the new system on the auxiliary line, surpassing projections with a 41% yield increase and 46% waste reduction. The board celebrated. Darren proudly brought investors and clients to tour our facility. And Nolan grew increasingly isolated as executives bypassed him and came directly to me. At the quarterly town hall, Nolan presented before me, blatantly taking credit for improvements my team had created, and I silently noted every misrepresentation. When it was my turn, I calmly corrected each claim, publicly recognizing Henri for his production line redesigns and highlighting every team member's contribution by name. Then I unveiled the results of the compensation equity review, explaining the methodology and emphasizing that a company's greatest asset is its people. The auditorium erupted in applause while Nolan slipped out a side door. The next morning, Darren summoned me to his office, where Nolan sat with arms crossed, claiming my initiatives were creating division, undermining authority, and building a parallel power structure. I listened, then connected my tablet to the display and revealed meticulously documented evidence of 3 months of targeted administrative obstruction, deleted meeting invitations, revoked lab access, delayed orders, unauthorized timeline changes. Each incident small alone, but unmistakable as a pattern when shown together. Nolan flushed red, sputtering that I was twisting routine issues into a conspiracy. "I'm not finished," I continued, switching the display to documentation of credit misappropriation, innovations and improvements created by my team but presented by Nolan as achievements of the operations division, and then to video clips of meetings where he blatantly claimed work he had not done. "Most concerning, however, is this," I added, pulling up the email chains Nolan had assumed were private. Messages instructing staff to delay or obstruct board-approved projects, a direct violation of company policy and potentially fiduciary responsibility. The room fell into a heavy silence as Darren's expression shifted from concerned to stunned. "How did you get those emails?" Nolan demanded, his voice tight. "Recipients who were uncomfortable with your instructions forwarded them to me," I replied calmly. "Quite a few people, actually." Darren finally spoke. "Nolan, is this accurate?" "It's taken completely out of context," he sputtered, growing desperate. "This woman came in here and disrupted established procedures. She demanded special treatment. The extraction process she implemented will generate $14 million in additional profit this year." Darren cut in sharply. "And the compensation adjustments affect less than 10% of our operating budget while reducing turnover. I'm not seeing the problem." "The problem," Nolan snapped, "is that she's undermining my authority. She went directly to you for this job. She bypassed the chain of command. She demanded special compensation. I demanded fair compensation. I corrected slowly, for myself and for others. His face twisted, so I added quietly, "And despite your 15 years of experience, you didn't recognize the value of my extraction method until the CEO explained it to you. You laughed when I stated my worth, and you've tried to sabotage my work ever since." Darren raised his hand. "That's enough. Nolan, I need to speak with you privately. Dr. Arvello, thank you for this information. We will continue our discussion later." I stepped out, but lingered just long enough to hear Darren's voice through the thin walls, sharp, disappointed, unmistakably furious. The board-wide email went out that afternoon announcing a leadership reorganization. Nolan was being transitioned into an advisory role effective immediately, and operations would report directly to the CEO until a replacement was selected. A week later, Darren called me in and, without ceremony, offered me a promotion. Executive Vice President of Innovation and Operations, a role that combined my current division with oversight of the entire operations team. The compensation number he slid across the desk made me blink. "You've shown exceptional technical expertise and leadership," he said. "You solve problems, stand by your principles, and elevate the people around you. That's what this company needs." I studied him carefully. "And the compensation transparency initiative continues?" "More than continues," he said. "I want you to accelerate it. The board has reviewed the data. We're going company-wide." I nodded. "In that case, I accept." 6 months after walking out of that humiliating interview, I sat at the head of the same conference room where Nolan had laughed at my counteroffer, only now the space was renovated, the culture transformed, and the company thriving. The compensation review was complete. Every employee understood exactly how their salary was determined. Productivity had risen 23%, and turnover had been cut in half. My extraction process had been fully implemented across all production lines, generating savings beyond our most optimistic forecasts, and already 3 competitors were attempting to license the technology. During a strategic planning meeting, Darren introduced a young environmental specialist named Akira, who approached me afterward with nervous admiration for both the recycling work and the compensation reform. I told her gently, "Never let anyone decide your worth, and never stay silent when you see others being undervalued." As she walked away, a news alert lit up my phone. My former employer, the one where Meredith stole my work, had fallen behind in the industry. Their stock had dropped 30% in 3 months. I smiled and closed the notification. Sometimes, the best. Revenge isn't destruction. It's building something better for yourself and everyone who comes after you. And if my story resonates, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share in the comments when you demanded your worth. Or when you wish you had. Remember, knowing your value isn't arrogance, it's self-respect. And sometimes, it's how you change an entire system.